Hafade Toros Hamzu. Once again, this is Michael Lujan Lavaqua, your host for Fanatsu. And I'm very excited today because we have our fourth episode focusing on Operation Christmas Drop. It's like an early Christmas gift to all of you out there who have been seeing discussions on Operation Christmas Drop on social media. Perhaps you have family members who really thought the movie was amazing, or perhaps you have friends who really hated the movie and say that that anyone who likes it should be disavowed, should lose their sort of Chamorro card or their Micronesian card or anything like that. But this episode is a great way to sort of end the discussion and a good way to end 2020 itself. And so before we get to the discussion, though, I wanted to remind everyone that Fanatsu is the official podcast for Independent Wuhan. It is independent media and it is indigenous media, and it is made possible by all of you who support it. Everyone who works for Independent Wuhan is volunteer, but those who support Fanatsu through Patreon are patrons. You make possible all that we do. And one of the exciting things for 2020 is that we haven't, because of the pandemic, been offering the regular perks for patrons that we do, but we're going to revamp them for 2021 so that those of you who sign up and support, you'll get access to secret podcasts and other sort of cool little episodes like that. But more of that later. I want to sort of get started on this episode because I know that the conversation might go on for a while. I have a feeling that it might go on for quite a while because we have a lot of interesting people in the Zoom right now. And so today's episode, as I mentioned, is focused on Operation Christmas Drop. And what's exciting about this is that so far we have heard from, in Fanatsu, the three Fanatsu episodes on Operation Christmas Drop, we heard one focusing on Chamorros and sort of issues of land alienation, militarization, and representation in the film. We talked to Luke Davis, who plans to do his Micronesian Studies thesis on Operation Christmas Drop, not the movie, but the drop itself. And then we also heard from a number of women who worked on the film Operation Christmas Drop, which came out on Netflix earlier this year, and they were talking about the opportunities the film represented, and also the need to support local artists, that if we don't like the way that Netflix represented us, then we should do more to support those from the region who are trying to represent this part of the world. And so one thing that's been missing, and I'm very excited to have some of the voices in this conversation, is what about those who have ties to the islands that receive the drop? Because in sort of the movie, which is playing right behind me over here. So if you can watch it over my shoulder. It's actually better watching it like this, where it's far away. It can't get you as much. Interestingly enough, me and my family played a drinking game the other day with this. We watched it for a second time and we played a drinking game. And so we each had little cards. Every time somebody says Guam, or you see the word Guam, you get the drink. Every time somebody has a flower in their hair, drink. Every time somebody says Pacific, drink. And so my sister's boyfriend, he won. Because interestingly enough, he had the card every time somebody says a Chamorro word. And there's Hafade, Setlu, Hatsa, Hugwa, Tulu, and then Feliz Navidad, which we can count as being Chamorro, even though they spelled it Spanish style. So people on Guam and sort of in the Chamorro diaspora have been talking about this movie, but when the US military represents this, and when the film represents it, what's missing is the people that are served by the drop, those in other islands throughout Micronesia. And so I'm glad to I'm glad to have this conversation, though, to bring in some of those voices, and to, any sort of space, in my opinion, in which we can try to overcome the divide between sort of the Marianas and Micronesia, or Chamorros, and everyone else in Micronesia is sort of good. It's positive. It's a step in the right direction. And so I'm very thankful to all of the guests on this Fanatsu today to sort of talk with me about Operation Christmas Drop, because I definitely need more therapy on this movie. And so we're gonna go around the Zoom room And if you will kindly introduce yourself. Lenny, your box is next to mine. And so go ahead. Por favor, seduce Masi.
Half day, Yahweh. My name is Leonard Leon. Everybody calls me Lenny. I'm a visual artist, and I have a film degree from University of Manawa, and I've done several, Pacific Island films in the past. And I produced 12 episodes of a public broadcast show called Micronesia Connections, which address the misrepresentation of Micronesians in Hawaii and try and use that as a platform to kind of re-educate people on their prejudice and reframe what Micronesia is so we can combat racism in Hawaii.
Seduce Masi. Seduce Masi. Thank you. And Nay, you're next.
Okay, so Tabur Nepoganding everyone. My name is Nadine Songeni. I'm from Utah, Pagpapayas, in Chuuk, in the Federal States of Micronesia, currently living on the beautiful island of Guam. I think to sum up what I do and who I am, I'm a Micronesian community advocate. Thank you.
Thank you, Seduce Masi. And Cassie.
Apade and buenas noches. Hiro Raranip. My name is Kathy. I'm from Chuuk, the island of Pispario. Have loss of the Mortlak Islands. I'm currently here in Guam. I am representing also the Micronesian community. I'm a community network, and I'm part of MHAC, Micronesian Health Advisory Coalition.
Thank you very much, Seduce Masi. And Kara, Pago Pago.
Hafaday, my name is Kara Flores. I am the director of NIHI, which is an indigenous media nonprofit with the goal of equipping the next generation of protectors in Guahan, across the NMI, and across Micronesia. So I just have to clarify that I'm indigenous to Guahan. I think the connection is that our nonprofit features Micronesian content, Chamorros, and then across, content from across our region.
Seduce Masi. And Emily.
Half a day, Casileria, Mango. I'm Emily Jar or Emily Keelan. I'm a poet, a writer, a curator, and a teacher. And I grew up on Guam and in Pohnpei and in Hawaii. And currently I'm in Italy, in the EU. And honestly, I can't say there's a discussion here about Operation Christmas Drop. So I think I'm kind of like on the outside, like I'm just hearing about it like from my parents who are watching it and from talking to Nadine. And so I just thought I would kind of join this conversation, but more as like, I guess, someone outside of the region or from the region, but living away and kind of outside of the debate. And this is the first time I'm ever doing a podcast, so I'm kind of excited to do that, which is why I don't have a nice like island background. But also, yeah, I did watch the film, and so I was keen to talk about it with other Micronesians, including Chamorros, of course. And yeah, so I'm just excited to talk to all of you today.
It's okay, I've done lots of podcasts and I still don't have a cool background. So So it's just whatever is behind me in my living room. And so I guess that's a good place for us to start. So I'm assuming that all of you have watched Operation Christmas Drop. And so first thoughts, who wants to share? First thoughts on the movie. What did you think about it? I know you have lots to say. Everyone is being very Micronesian about this. Everyone's being very Islander about this. Everyone is waiting.
Wait, so sorry, Mia. Jules, the Yappies girl, can join for like 15 minutes if that's okay.
Oh yes, she can come in and she can share.
Sorry.
She can share her thoughts.
Sorry, guys. It's just good thing this is pre-recorded.
It's okay. I'm going to leave this in. This is the equivalent of chickens in the background because I don't have any chickens around my apartment that are making noise. So this will.
Yeah. I begged her to please take off take like a few minutes just to talk and share her perspective from a Yappies.
Oh, that's awesome.
Member.
And so, Jules, I know Lenny said that you only have 15 minutes. Did you want to just share your piece about the film or about the drop?
Of course, as Islanders, we're very thankful and we consider ourselves blessed to receive things for Christmas, of course. So that's always a good thing. But on a side note, it seemed as if now that I'm older and I've lived abroad and I see the effects of, how do I say it, Western effect on how we do our day-to-day livings, I feel that it reminds me of that certain movie, Gods Must Be Crazy. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie, where all these African tribes are doing so well, and then like a bottle just fell, and they were all fighting over it. I don't know if it's just an Islander mentality, but yeah, we appreciate everything because it's of course free. It was given from, people gave, some from their hearts. So it's always appreciated. But also, when these drops happened, I was still like a little girl. And I remember that families were more interested in the parachutes than the actual contents of the boxes. There were sometimes like the boxes would have things that weren't ideal to island living. We'd have bathing suits, which we're not allowed to wear, dresses, of course, we have our own lavas, high heels. So just some things that weren't ideal. I don't want to say it's what is that word? Ignorance, because that sounds really mean. Because of course, like I said in the beginning, as Islanders, we're always appreciative of whatever is given, something like that. But on a side note, now that I'm older, I feel that it's unnecessary. If can be, or if they are going to continue doing island drops, like drop things that the Islanders can utilize.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And I think the reference to the gods must be crazy is a pretty good one though, because I think that I've seen pictures of people from the Christmas drop. Sometimes they're holding up stuff that is very useful, perhaps. Sometimes they're holding up like like multicolored unicorns, or what's it called? Like random board games, and stuff like that. And my favorite is the prom dresses. When people put prom dresses in the Christmas drop, and then they drop it on different islands. And so I think what you're mentioning there is important, because talking about that impact, right? Is everything that is given, just because it's given, is it good? Or is there a cost? Do you lose something if you take gifts, all the gifts, right? And so
also we have to take into consideration that when these things come in, it's a yearly thing, of course. So the things that are plastic, are non-biodegradable, we don't have the option to ship it off island to get it recycled or to get it, trash. So all those things stay. They end up in our waters. They end up, on the land. It just becomes trash. So that's added trash, I guess.
No, thank you. Did anyone else want to comment on that too? Well, thank you, Julie, for sharing your thoughts. Especially, I like the way that you put it out there, sort of as that there's some positives to it, but then also, that we should maybe be a little bit critical about it too.
Of course. It always helps to try and see things, because I've also not volunteered, but donated items to the boxes. And when I think about donations, like t-shirts are always, they're always good. Everybody wears t-shirts, even in gently used ones. But like you were mentioning, prom dresses, when will anybody use a prom dress? It just doesn't make sense, and it ends up as trash because nobody knows what to do with it.
Oh, thank you. Did anyone else want to? I saw when she mentioned the gods must be crazy, I saw a few of you laughing. I don't know if that ages you, the way it sort of calls out my age. If it calls out your age.
It's because many of us know each other, and we've actually spoken about the film and at some point kind of referenced it, and it really does bring that social disorder to a community that's really tightly knit. Jules, you probably could talk about it, or Kathy, about how people in the outer islands fight over the parachute,
Yeah. Or the parachutes.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody wants it. They want it to, put it out in their yard, and who owns it? Then they're like, oh, who should own it? Should the community own it? Should a certain family own it? You can't. That's not something you can, because we only get two per island, at least, at the most. So how do you separate that evenly amongst everyone? You can't.
Yeah, and actually, Jules, I think you really bring a good point there and a good question of who owns it, right? Culturally, chiefs are the ones who receive stuff and distributes them. Culturally, if it's something off the land, off the ocean, right?
Yeah.
But now that something is being dropped out of nowhere, does the chief own it? And does he have the right to make claim over those things? Or do people now, dismiss the chief's place in society and culture and just say, you know what, I'm the one who first found this, I'm keeping it?
Yeah. It's not just the parachute itself, including the paracords, I mean, the people use the paracords for different things. So I'm like, maybe rope would be even better as something donated to be dropped. I'm not sure, but well, I've lived abroad for a while, so I don't really know what the islands really need right now. Just, it's just an experience that I was referencing from before. People looked forward more to the parachutes than the actual contents of the boxes. And it also got dangerous. I know there was one Christmas when they did the drop, because the kids, they all want to come out and see the airplanes. So they weren't listening to, of course, their parents. The airplane had to do several rounds. They had to circle around the islands before they can actually do drops, because the kids were just all over the place. Of course, they were excited, to see, actual drops. Some of the items or the boxes landed in the water, where the community members had to actually take out boats to go and retrieve the objects. So, I don't know, it could be also a little bit of a safety issue as well. I think you can't really control people from not going to the area that things need or are going to be dropped at as well.
I think that's such an interesting point, and reminds me of going back to the film, like the idea that how much did they consult the people of Guam in making this film, and then paralleling that with like how much thought was put into putting the contents together to drop at these islands, in the part of the islands, and just kind of like such a weird comparison, kind of like thinking that they're just, that's why it's for some people in the islands, they can almost compare it to trash being just dropped off, and we're supposed to kind of take it as is, and if we say something otherwise, then we're deemed ungrateful, which we like Jules have rightly said, like we always want to give that impression that we're grateful, or that we are grateful people. So it just reminded me of that in the film, kind of like thinking the film itself and the way kind of putting it together, where there might have been some struggles with the way the film was put together. Just kind of like how we're dealing with what things are being brought to the.
No, that's an interesting metaphor, because in Guam we don't normally think about things being brought into the island in the same way, whereas Christmas Drop gives you a clear metaphor, right, of sort of influences being put into the island. Where on Guam it's usually just anything, right? Brown tree snake, sure, why not? No, of course not. The brown tree snake's bad now, but just about everything else, it's just like bring it all in. So it is interesting, because what other islanders see as potentially being trash in sort of the Marianas, Guam in particular, people have yet to see a lot of that stuff as trash yet, as it potentially being harmful, right? That's the difference in islands, is that if you come from a smaller island, you have to be more serious about something like trash, something like your environment. Whereas if you live in a larger island, you can kind of pretend you're California, right? That you don't got to worry about any of these things, because we got so much land, we have so much this and that, and we can always just bury it in the ground. And so that's one of the, I think, the differences in terms of these sorts of issues. But right, who wanted to, Kathy, were you going to say something earlier about sort of the drop? I think.
Well, I was just, going to say that I agree with Juliet. Jules, everything you said is true. Before they drop those boxes, they know what kind of things that the island or the people need. But I want to add on, like, what is the purpose of the film? Why this film was made? Are they just trying to make it for entertainment? Or are they trying to send a message that, been long time, and they wanted to let the world know that this is what they had done in the islands? What is the purpose? There are, things in the film that people don't agree with. And I would say that they can make it better. They could make it better. They could make it better if they work with the people and get their inputs. For example, Kapingamarangi, that's the name of an island. That's offending the people from Kapingamarangi, because that's the name of an island. And when they say Kapingamarangi, it's like, where is that? What location is that? So those are other things that they could have learned from the people. Like, how do you say this island? How do you pronounce it? representation of us. I'm very happy and I'm proud of those that they were in the film, like from our islands, from Marshall, from Chuuk, but representation. There is a girl with a skirt. The skirt that she was wearing, it's not even right because she was wearing a skirt that has a patch of the bandana. And that's not where we come from because I myself don't like that. And that type of skirt in our islands called pirak. And there is a reason for, and there is a meaning of pirak. Women, when they sew mumu, the dress, there are pieces of cloth, materials, yarn that left over from the dress, from the mumu. So they don't want to trash those, they don't want to throw it. They said, let's make skirt. They take those things, those materials, put it together, make skirt, and become a skirt called pirak. Pirak comes from the word block. You know, the cement block where they build the house, they put layer and layer and make a house. That's where the word pirak comes from. But when that girl was wearing that skirt with that bandana, it was, if you see, it's a black, white one, and they use it to make a skirt. That's a wrong representation of us. Because that's not what pirak means. They bought that bandana and sew it together. I myself never wear anything like that because that's not good. So those are, I mean, there are things in the movie that, in the film that people are upset about. But I also give credit. I give credit for to those that they were part of the movie. They're in the movie, trying to be part, you know, representing our community. Because of course, being in a movie, it's a big thing. It's a big thing, you know. When you show, especially when they show it on Netflix, my relatives, hey, I saw our brother in there. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, Isa. He was walking by, and I'm like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, but do you know what's that mean, right? But you know, what is the purpose? Do we want it to just entertain people, or do we want to give a good message? Or are we saying, because like Jules said, we've been living abroad. Now our eyes are open. We see things and we're like, are you just having mercy on us because we don't have those kind of things? Today, we have those kind of things. We can get it ourselves. Thank you for giving us free stuff. But if you're going to just drop it because you want to show something different from what you're really supposed to do, then show something. Give us something. Of course, the parachute, people fight over the parachute. Who wants to want it? I was there when they dropped on my island and I watched. They were fighting over things and I just said, this is not good at all. No more working together, because it's like, oh, it's free. You can get it. You don't get penalty if you just grab whatever you want. Nobody's gonna penalize you for, you know, take it because it's free. It doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to everybody. So they just run and grab it and run. Little kids, oh, they're excited. They think that, you know how during Christmas time we do this thing. We throw candies. We throw candies at when we go parade or stuff like that. So they think, you know, it dropped. When the thing dropped, we just grab it, you know, because they drop it, throw it at us. So we'll just grab it and run. So that's how I see that. Today it's kind of different because we live abroad and we've seen many things. We learn so much things of you know, what is the meaning of this and what is the meaning of back home. What is important to us, what is not important to us, and how are we getting exposed? Because many times probably we're getting exposed, and outsiders will be exposing us, our culture, who we are, and that's also sacred to us. We want to keep as much as we want. We don't want to expose our culture in a misinterpretation. So that's my point. But I understand, our political head people, they see it that it's positive, it's good. Of course, it is good. We appreciate what people also keep us. So, thank you.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you for sharing your thoughts. You bring in so many good points. And I wonder, Kara or Lenny, as filmmakers, did you want to address the question about what the movie is for? What does it exist for? Is it because I know that that's one thing in the discussion is some people argue it's military propaganda, and other people say no, it's just a movie. Don't think about it, just enjoy it. But then what would you say then about that?
I'll let Kara go first.
Well, I'm gonna talk a little bit about Nadine and I had some sort of an intro to the film before it was released, because we were asked to kind of serve as a casting point, and there are specific kids that the film requested, and so I did get to take a look at the script, or at least parts of it ahead of time. There is a very specific reason why we said no to participating. As an Indigenous media company, our goal is to equip the next generation of protectors. It's to help the kids of our region to see themselves as change agents. And the movie does the opposite of that. So it portrays, island kids in a way that, in my opinion, does not respect their dignity. It doesn't acknowledge the very complex history and relationship that all of Micronesia has had with the US. But it does not portray our kids as change agents. And so for us, that's problematic. It completely goes against our mission. I didn't feel that it was my place to say no for the kids that they requested, even though it was really difficult to offer that opportunity to them when we did not agree with the premise of the film. But all of our kids said no.
Yes, I do remember our conversation and I do remember the process of even coming up with the decision to not participate. And I was really conflicted for many reasons. And I think it also kind of shows the way also the reactions to the movie are also very complicated and mixed because of that. And I think when I first having my daughter participate in NIHI, like I believe in the mission, and I was I think it was also a way for me as a Micronesian or Chuukese on Guam to start feeling like making my place here, because I until today I don't feel 100% comfortable to say this is my home for many reasons. And so having my girl part participate was a way to kind of get comfortable. And then when that opportunity came up, there was, let's just say that when I shared with very little people after the movie was done or showing, a lot of them were kind of upset that I didn't go with it. And I was like, I couldn't even begin to explain what was going in my head for a couple of days. So I don't think to now I can't explain it. I don't think I can articulate it in the way that will make sense, because it's also, it shows that complex relationship with being a person who identifies as Chuukese or Micronesian, but a U.S. citizen or a citizen of a U.S. territory.
So I'll take. So there's this, very popular term that people, tell filmmakers or tell islanders like, oh, if you want, films that tell your stories, then make films that tell your stories. But the fact is, there are people that make those films. Kara is one of them. Nihi does it, and Nihi does it in a way that is very inclusive of other Micronesians. They do feature Pohnpeians, Chuukese, Marshallese, and not just Chamorro, but Micronesia as a whole. And I really admire that about them. And they do. There are people that does it. I did it for 12 episodes in Hawaii, and then other short films that kind of show, the Micronesian view of things, from a Micronesian lens, per se. And my audience was 2 Micronesians and those who aren't aware of Micronesian cultures. And then this film comes in and, people are saying, well, it's just a film, right? Yes, it is just a film, but if you look at the Chuukese and Micronesian cultures, Marshallese as well, there's a red and blue bandana that is associated all because of a film. Gangs that were created all because their passion for their love for that film. The Bloods and the Crips are now in other communities because of a film. The Western culture, the country music influence in Micronesia because of films, John Wayne. There are Micronesian kids who are named John Wayne because of films. People don't realize that it's not just a film, right? The thing about the film that really bothers me is all the work that Kara, Nihi, and other indigenous filmmakers from the Pacific do to show a true Micronesian perspective, or at least some Micronesian perspective, is flipped around by this one film, just because they have a bigger budget and they have the money to tell whatever they want to say. Kathy asked the question, who's the film representing? Who's it made for, right? Why was it made? Actually, Miguel, in his, I think it was your second podcast with Luke Davis, right? You said that almost no military film, I could be slaughtering this, but correct me if I'm wrong. Almost no military film is made without military approval or Department of Defense approval.
Or it's that if you allow the military to look at your script and edit it and basically change the story based on what they want, then they'll let you use equipment for free, locations for free, and personnel for free. But that's why they have. So if you have a movie that makes the military look bad, then you show them the script and they'll say, you know what, we don't like this. We want the heroes of the story to be the US military. And then you have to change it if you want their help or their approval. But yeah, so most movies, that's why the most famous example is the Transformers movies. Why is the movie called Transformers, but the heroes are the US military? Well, because Michael Bay has a very close relationship to the US military. But anyways, yes, go ahead.
So that for me is the answer to the question, like, who is it made for? It's to, romanticize militarization in the Pacific. That's the way I see it. And the other thing is how kids perceive it, right? Going back to the red and blue bandanas that Micronesian kids wear, and part of the reason why Kathy is really upset about the banana in the skirt is because Micronesian kids aren't all about gangs, right? The bandana in Micronesia represents a gang, in some way. So the danger of the film is there are many kids that are born outside of the islands, never exposed to Micronesia. This film could potentially be their first exposure to Micronesia. And that would be, you're a person of pity, which, by the way, films like this perpetuate that Micronesians are helpless and need rescue from you, me, like, no, look, Micronesians have been surviving in lands with very little raindrop a year with almost no rain, still surviving for thousands of years, without any handout from anybody. They, they, they really should be the one pitying us, to be honest, because everybody in the Western world live in debt. Get a college degree, you're living in debt. Get a PhD, you're living in debt. Get a car, you're living in debt. Those toys you handed out, you bought those with credit, right? You're living in debt. They're not. They're the one who should pity us. That's just my view of it.
No, I think you're very right there in terms of how youth in Micronesia would see it. It reinforces that idea that some of you have shared, that when you're young, you accept that this is exciting. It's a great thing, but then as you get older and you learn more, you realize it's not. But for other children that may see this, it may reinforce that subordinate relationship. It may reinforce that idea that we need others. That Lenny, as you mentioned, after so many years of sort of taking care of yourselves, taking care of each other within the region, suddenly this movie just makes it seem like, oh no, the military, the US takes care of us. That's how we survive. And it's so sad. And Emily, I wanted to bring you into this discussion because I know that, as a poet, and because you haven't spoken yet, so I'm calling you out. It's no other reason.
Oh, yes. Actually, I was thinking, after Jules spoke, I was thinking about how the FSM has canceled the Christmas drop this year. And from different family members, initially people were like, oh, we're so stupid. How can we be canceling that? We need that stuff. We need the Christmas drop. What's Christmas going to be without the Christmas drop? And I wanted to watch the film and think about it some more, because honestly, I'm from Pohnpei and we don't get the Christmas drop because it's a high island. We only the outer islands get the Christmas drop. So I don't have it's kind of like the Guam experience in that I don't have personal experience with like waiting for the Christmas drop to come down. I don't have that experience. I know the outer islanders from like Kapungan Marangi and Pungilap and Nukpuar, those islands, they get the Christmas drop. So I even have that kind of prejudice myself as someone from a high island, because even other islanders from big islands in Micronesia we have our hierarchies. So at Pohnpeians, we look down on the outer islanders and we think, oh, well, they need to get the Christmas drop because they need all these things. So even other islanders have this kind of superiority complex. So I heard family saying like, oh, we're so stupid for canceling the Christmas drop. And after hearing Jules and Kathy give their remarks about their experience with the drop, it totally makes sense that FSM canceled it, because with the kids running up to the box packages and opening them, that's such an easy way to transmit COVID. So actually, I'm so happy that the FSM canceled the Christmas drop. And it's also kind of like an FU to the US military, kind of like, we don't have to get your stuff, like we'd rather keep our island safe from COVID than, get your Santa Claus in the airplane coming and giving us free stuff that we should be so grateful for. So it's just making me think of all the different layers of like kind of our internalized colonialism, or just how it's not just like people from Guam also who like might have certain opinions about other islanders, but it's also like Pohnpeians thinking, oh, the other outer islanders, they need to get all these things. But yeah, I kind of feel like after watching this film and thinking more critically about the Christmas drop, that maybe FSM should just cancel the Christmas drop indefinitely. But then at the same time, I'm not from the outer islands, so I never received anything from the Christmas drop. So I think there's many different layers working. And also I think we have to keep in mind that the film is one thing and then the Christmas drop itself is another thing. And but I feel like this film is a really good teaching tool. And it after watching, I thought I wish I was teaching right now because I want to teach this film because there's just so much to to say about it. But it's just a good way for us to start having these discussions, because if it wasn't for this film, I don't think we would really be thinking critically about the Christmas drop, or it would just go on and we'd be, so anyway, that's just what I was thinking of.
Yeah. Well, those are, I think, even for me, I recognize those layers even very personally because I was in Parapayas, where my dad is from, this island where behind me. So I'm here in this little island, a little hill, but on the other side, the capital of our island, that's where they have the field where it's conducive for the drop. And so I remember being in Chip once when the drop came, and I remember like my feelings why are we going over to check what this is, and let's I want to sure you guys get something, because my village is very very poor, right? And the things that I bring to the islands can never really fulfill, or at least we provide for all the people that I love. And there's a part in the movie where it really stung my heart, because that little way that little that clip where she's giving things to the islanders, or that little girl, it reminded me, as a person, I feel I also have I'm coming from a position of comfort because I live abroad, and we can make money to buy what I want. And so when I go back, it's my responsibility then to take what I have to share with the islander, my family back home, right, in the islands where there is no access. And so for me, when I do that, I mean, it made me think about the way I do it when I bring, we send things back home, things from, gently used things from here. It made me kind of critical too, but at the same time, I'm at least when I do it, it's out of love, or I'm liking it that we're doing it because there's this responsibility to each other, and sharing of resources and whatever. Whereas the movie just kind of, it's this person who has no connection to the people or the island that's doing this gesture. So it's even more meaningless. So it made me very conscious about that, because with people that live abroad, at least in Chip, are to the left of me, there's all these boxes that my mom collects things to send back home, because that's the mentality. We have access to things that we want to send, right? And it's all out of love, and it's all out of this idea that it's our responsibility to be providing and sharing what we can. And then that also then for me, shows how people, islanders living outside of their islands, are struggling themselves. So obviously they're not gonna be able to go buy a new, a whole box of new things. There's a reason why we send used things for us, for our family, because we don't make enough. We're struggling we're struggling to live, so we don't have the luxury to buy a lot of new stuff. But so when we send things, they're out of love and they're out of our responsibility. Whereas in the film, when she did that, it was kind of I was kind of conflicted, that's so weird, but at the same time, do I do that when I go back home? It made me more conscious about it. And I do know, getting older, I've been more conscious about what I'm bringing back to the island. And so I laughed a lot when I get give me these plastics, or let me do this, or I don't want to buy things, and they'll laugh at me because they're not really thinking of that yet, because they're still kind of thinking of conservation or recycling. They recycle themselves. They do recycling practices themselves that I that I'm coming in with a different kind of recycling mentality.
I may
And
add
so-
to Nadine, it is true of the distribution, the chief distribute divided up among, you know, the people of the islands. But the thing is, let's say there are 100 kids, only there are and then there are only 50 toys. What about the other 50 kids don't get toys? So that's also one thing. Who will get what when they distribute all these things? That's why probably, you know, the last time I saw it, people are rushing and get it because they will say, maybe I will not get that if they distribute it. So maybe I'll just cook crab and, you know, take it and I will have it. But when I was little, I remember when it was distributed equally by the chief. But these days it's different. And of course it is true. When we were little, we see it differently. And now we're growing up, we also see it differently. So I also agree with Nadine.
I have something to add to what manager Emulator said about, you know, it's probably a good thing that this film came out, and then we can learn from this in so many ways. In a way, I do agree, especially with the news not too long ago about, you know, a certain movie, you know, Avatar 2, you know, possibly depicting navigators. You know, now traditional navigation in our cultures throughout Micronesia is a very, very sacred and important part of our identity. How they portray that in that film, if it does come out and it does portray Micronesian navigators, how will that portray us? Like, this film could help us if we are able to speak up about the wrongs that they've done. Then it'll teach in some way Hollywood that, hey, we can't just write any script in accordance to what our director or our funders want. You know, we have to take the cultures into consideration. We have to take, you know, what is culturally, you know, appropriate.
From what I understand, in the making of this film, there were people that were trying to correct some of the inaccuracies. And from what I understand, that was not paid attention to. And so I think, like, and I just want to say, I can't, because, you know, because we aren't recipients of the drop, I feel like I can't speak of the actual drop, right? Like, that's not my place to say whether it's right or wrong, but I think that our place as Micronesians and sister and cousin islands is to be respectful of some of the concerns that are raised, like the history in the Marshall Islands, right? The history of the Christmas drop started around the same time as the nuclear testing. And so there are, from what I understand, Lenny, there are some feelings around that, you know, there are real problems that the US has created and should fix across Micronesia. The ones in Guahan I'm a little more familiar with. The pollution, the land taking, all of those things, there are real things that can be fixed. And if they took all the money that goes into Christmas drop and actually, and I don't know again if the islands would want this, but actually invested in infrastructure or cleanups, or, you know, those are things that I think would really make a difference and could equip those communities better for themselves, right? And I know that cleanups in Guahan would mean more to me than handouts, right? So, yeah, I I think that there are so many complex layers because, of course, many of the people that work for Operation Christmas Drop are well-intentioned, right? And it seems like a really nice thing to do. But meanwhile, across the Pacific, across Micronesia, you have these big issues. Some here, some in other places throughout Micronesia, these huge issues that have and continue to create suffering. And so you have this this event that almost seems like a PR campaign, and then these issues that go unaddressed. And so in that sense, I mean, speaking as a filmmaker, that seems kind of imbalanced because we can create films about the issues that we're struggling with, but we don't have the budget or the resources to make them as visible as Operation Christmas Drop will be, right? Our films, generally we create for our people. And so, and if our people see them, then we're happy. But if we're trying to raise issues around, activism or the big firing range complex that's being built over our primary aquifer, those things are not, it's hard to make those things visible. It's difficult for us to show those things to the world. Or the problem with the dome, that as sea levels rise, that the dome and the leaking, which is a potential risk to all of us, right? To all of our islands, to all of us. That issue is not very visible, or it's not as visible as it should be. So as a filmmaker, I feel like as an Indigenous filmmaker, what we do is we really check, even within our own culture, like, is this accurate? Is this respectful? Is this something that we should put forward? And when we are working with other people in our surrounding islands, we ask those same questions, Is this how you want this to be portrayed? Is this accurate? Is this respectful, right? And so if we do that, and we are Indigenous, then anyone else that comes here that is not from here should do those things as well. Those are my scattered thoughts.
That's one of the challenges that I face as an Indigenous Micronesian filmmaker, and I'm sure Kara faces it too. Like, she has to make films within these guidelines that she set herself as a filmmaker. Not only that, but she also has to, the cultural part of it, the entire, for her, the entire Chamorro communities as her critic on how these will be portrayed. Like, if she represents something wrong, she's going to be called out for it. And if I represent something wrong in Marshallese, I'll be called out for it. I could even be ostracized for it. But then outsiders like Netflix are accepted and allowed to come in and just tell however they want to tell. It's kind of like, it's a challenge. It just adds additional layer of challenge for Indigenous filmmakers, and making it even tougher for us to tell our stories.
I actually don't want to be critical of the people who participated, because I understand, right? Like, I understand why people would want to participate. It's a good experience in many ways. And so I'm not critical of those who participated. I am critical of the script, of who it passed through, of who decided to make that film. The white savior narrative is really played out. It's old, right? Like, it's something that Hollywood has been doing for years. And at some point, I think we have to push back against that narrative because it's not healthy for our kids. It's not how we want our kids to perceive themselves. And so I know that Lenny and I both, one of the reasons why we do filmmaking is to change perceptions. It's to help our kids realize that that we are change agents, that we are who we've been waiting for, you know. So films like this really work against the work that we've been doing, and they're much more visible and more popular than our shows will ever be. So yeah, that's but I don't want to be critical of those who participated. I think that that at some point we have to hold responsible the industry that makes these films about us and writes these scripts, and give them enough of a hard time that they have to start rethinking how they write about us.
I can only speak as far as being critical of the people who participated, because a lot of them think that they don't have the option to say no. And the truth is we do. I did it. I said no to Godzilla in 2014, even though the money was good. Kara said no when they were, checking me to be part of the casting, agency. You can say no, not because you don't want to participate, but because you don't want to be represented wrong, because that's how many of these people who are going to watch these films don't know about where these islands are. Not even Guam. Not many people in the United States know what Guam itself. No, it's an unincorporated territory, and part of the definition for me of unincorporated territory is nobody really talks about it. Because there's just so many problems there. As far as the Runit Dome, the nuclear bombing in Bikini Atoll, and the land grabbing in Guam and the military buildup. I personally believe this film is to encourage more people to pursue residency in Guam if they're serving in the military through the military buildup of Guam.
No, I like the way that you, Kara and Lenny, both of you have reminded about the existing history and relationship between Micronesia and then the United States. And to focus this movie in a white savior sort of narrative, the way they did, it's like setting movies in Latin American countries about sort of Americans that are building houses down there and not talking about how all the governments have been overthrown by the United States in the past. And that's why there's so much turmoil there. It's a similar sort of thing. And one thing that I think is interesting about this, and I think that Chamorros often have it the worst in Micronesia, is thinking that somehow our story is part of America and not part of the rest of the world, which America usually takes advantage of. Because in an earlier podcast, somebody talked about the Solomon Report in terms of thinking about, America's blueprint for Micronesia. And then, but how we don't, even within our region, we don't take that as seriously as we should sometimes, because it means that what the CIA talks about overthrowing, leaders in other countries, they've talked about it in Micronesia too, saying that if they need to do this to maintain control, then they should do that to maintain control. And so this is a good reminder that, that of the ways in which, as you said, Lenny, unincorporated means too complicated, don't want to deal with it. Just, let's just make this a feel-good movie, in the sense, make Americans feel good about themselves, right? But as so many of you, I really love the way that so many of you put it. Like, once you grow up and see a little bit more, then you realize, is the drop the best way to do this? As Kara said, wouldn't it be better if you just put the resources into something that built up and sustained something in the islands? And as some of you, as Jules, who mentioned earlier, some of the stuff isn't useful? Wouldn't it be better if it was actually stuff that was useful and not just sort of random things that were collected? And so, yeah, thank you for that. I think you brought in a lot of things to think about there. And so one thing that I wanted to come back to though was the issue of, because it was mentioned, the FSM government sort of not wanting to do the drop because of sort of the coronavirus. And it's interesting because that adds a whole new layer into this, where the US, the movie is trying to portray that these are just islands floating in the ocean that don't have anything. And the US is dropping fishing gear and Barbie dolls on them. But in truth, the United States and the leaders of these countries are negotiating for their compact. And so I wondered, especially those of you that have ties in the FSM, if you wanted to talk about that, you don't have to talk about your presidents or any politicians or anything like that. But it is that, unlike, it is that sort of, the islands that get the drop, it's not the same as in the 50s when it was the trust territory. Now the islands are sovereign, freely associated, independent countries. And so for this movie to come along now, it's even more, it's like a couple slaps in the face too. Because it's not just that the people in these islands are backwards and primitive, but it's also taking away the fact that you have your sovereignty, that you have diplomatic relations with the United States, you have agreements and treaties. And so I wondered if anyone wanted to speak to that, because I found that to be very interesting.
Actually, bring up a really good point that I didn't realize at first, and I really just watched it the other day in preparation of this. I also really tried my best not to have to watch it. And it's not good, because then I knew I didn't want to give any feedback if I didn't watch it. But what I realized in talking to some of the elders as part of my feeling like getting comfortable to talk about this, they are also very involved in the whole drop. Like they're in the planes themselves. Now that's not like a great thing, but were that to be shown in the film, would have at least supported that the US there were negotiations with leaders of these places for this event. Like, I'm not saying like that's a good, like, I'm not looking for something to validate the like people from Micronesia, but to actually show the sovereign leaders of these places involved in this occasion, that would have been a little, I think it might have a little not made the movie as cringy as it is for me right now. But I didn't think of it that way, and that's a good point, because I was just trying to I guess I'm still processing different parts of the film, but that's a really good point, Miguel. I didn't think of it that way, but you're right. And the two people, at least one of the people I talked to mentioned they were on the plane, and it was I guess because it's a different experience. So of course we like to have awesome experience to be in, but then of course it's more than that, right? And so I guess this is why I'm grateful for this conversation, because I think it almost shows that it's okay to talk about some things that some things that might not be the best to talk about publicly. They're more kind of like the cookhouses conversation where we just kind of go over the fireside chat. So it's kind of interesting to sort of hear. Yeah, that's all I can say. I don't have any others.
I'm gonna jump in and say something. You actually brought up a good point, Miguel, or kinda indirectly. It is very suspicious, like with China's movement into the Pacific all the way down to South Pacific. It's very interesting and it just seems really, really coincidentally timed, right? Palau in September, I believe, offered to host a military base for the United States. And then first time ever does Secretary of Defense visit Micronesia to negotiate about compact of the association, right? it just seemed really, really timely. So yeah, I mean, I could imagine leaders watching in Micronesia watching this and saying, "Oh yeah, see, the U.S. military has always been rescuing us by giving us Barbie dolls, you know, from the air. So you know, they're doing good for us. So let's just do whatever they want to do. You know, let's not check line by line what the negotiation, you know, contains, and just sign off on it." I could easily say that, and yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of policies that the Marshall Islands government will not negotiate. They'll be like, okay, that's fine, you know, because in many Marshallese mindsets, the United States is bigger. The United States is a savior, right? In fact, Marshallese kids would join the U.S. military straight out of the Marshall Islands, straight with their Marshallese citizenship, join the military and say, "I'm fighting for my country." Your country is Marshall Islands, not the United States, right? But they've come to believe that they are the United States, and then everything that is good that they have is from the United States military. That's the mindset they tend to be stuck in right now.
Mm. Oh, that's a very interesting point, because I think I remember watching the movie Island Soldier by Nathan Fitch, and it sort of brought in a lot of that complication where I remember the mother of the sort of the soldier who died, who they followed to the funeral back into the islands. You know, she said, if we're going to serve and we're going to die for this country, then we should be able to vote for president. You know, that if we're going to have this close relationship, then we should have some power over what they do. It was a very interesting and very complicated sort of moment, and it's thank you for bringing that up. Does anyone want to sort of talk a little more about these complications? And it doesn't have to be only related to the movie, but it could just be sort of as the sort of a Micronesian experience, sort of those complications.
Well, we know and we understand that our islands is a good location and spot for military zone. That's why, you know, we have that relation. We have that relation because if US doesn't have our islands, then maybe China will have us, and then China will have their military base, and then that's a threat. That will be a threat to the United States. But because it's a good location for the military zone for US, then we have that relationship with the US to allow us to come in the US with just our passport. We don't need to have a visa. We don't need to have a green card. We can only come in with our passport and get our I-94, which would never expire. The I-94 does not expire as long as we want to stay, and whenever we want to leave, we can go back home. And even if I want only to come for 5 hours and then go back, that's fine. So that's part of the treaty, the relationship, because they want to keep us because of military zone. And that's what it's also part of our community talk and why we are in this relationship with the United States, but because of that reason.
I have like a different, I think as I gotten older, I think I've changed even the way I look at my US passport. I mean, there's things that I'm very grateful for, like the convenience of having it when I go travel through different countries. But then I think about growing up, like kind of like what the film tries to portray, that the US is here to save us or to help us. So I remember growing up thinking like, even the way I talk about migration for my family, it was always about traveling, um, for traveling outwards for better opportunities. And that was always the mindset about with migration. And then I don't know if it's just maybe me and my family, but like this idea that we are now going on this journey, and then we're in a place where we think that there's this promised land or these opportunities. Now that I'm an adult with young kids, like the struggle is so real that I think about my being naive, thinking that I was gonna just have these kind of given to me because of my citizenship or because of my more closer relationship to the U.S. being on a the soil or U.S. soil, or when I did live in Hawaii and visited the States, like I would think that the farther I was closer to the U.S. physically, that my chances would change, but it does very superficially, but like on the deeper sense, it's so disconnected, and it's become such a huge problem that I can't even begin to unpack it with my family members. I have people who are traveling to hotspots in the US during this pandemic because of so-called economic opportunities. They're leaving their COVID-free islands to go to like a hotspot. I can't express it because they have very valid reasons for wanting to go get a job that would pay to provide, food and things. But sometimes we forget to think about how we got into the situation in the first place that keeps perpetuating this dependency. And then again, back to what Joel said at the beginning, it's maybe part of why it's hard to talk about it is to seem like we're ungrateful because like to seem like we're not grateful to people, and because we have this inherent way of treating people around us and elders most especially, or if the US looks physically large, so this idea that they're the ones who will help, then if we show any kind of ungratitude or questioning, then we seem ungrateful. And so like that's like it's even hard to begin to talk about it for me, I guess, because then the hardships that I know my family faces because of this relationship with the US. But at the same time, they're seeing that they're benefiting because of this relationship with the US. So it's so complicated, and I don't know. I can't even complete my sentence, but I just needed to add that. I think the one thing I liked about this decision for the FSM to not accept the drop, I thought like Em said in the beginning, like it was kind of like for some reason some triumph in a way that the US would say, like this superpower country, that they would say, no, it's okay, we're not gonna, but of course our president had to be very diplomatic and explain that it's not about us questioning your whatever, but we, like Kara said, we want to protect our people from this sickness. But it's so interesting that it's because of this situation that we're in that really allowed a physically small place, to tell a physically large partner or relationship or whatever to stop this long-standing humanitarian effort. I don't know. It was an interesting way to think about it that way.
And of course, it's all, I would say that I'm very proud of our country for stopping that, because in a way, they listen to the people. There are people that they said, no, we don't want the Trump, because for how long FSM want to uplift the closure of coming, because the people from the islands, they're the ones who stopped it. They asked, no, we don't want to uplift the closure. We need to continue because we can't afford to have the virus to be here. We can't. And I'm happy that they don't allow the drop this year. And I know that our president had listened he listens. He listens to the people. Not that he only made the decision, but he listened to the people. And the other thing that I'm happy you brought it up, Nadine, about the opportunity, land of freedom. Many times, our people always come out because of that reason. We have to come to the U.S. for education, for economy, looking for a job. Healthcare is the most important thing. And my whole family moved out here. I was the last person that left in Chuk to finish up my high school. I stayed with my mom's family, and when I graduated, that's when I came out here. But recently, many of us have talked about going back home because we don't feel free. We don't feel free. We realize that we live here to work to pay someone. You work to pay someone, but you're not paying yourself. Because what you need to do, you need to pay your rent, you need to pay your car, you need to pay your electricity, you need to pay your toilet. Everything is, you have to pay. So they're like, man, is this the dream that we're chasing? How Father Iso is mentioning in his book, the dream, chasing the dream, right? This is not a dream. Or maybe it's a dream that we're looking for, but it would never happen because it's only a dream. It's not reality. The reality is you come and you suffer. You suffer. I moved from Hawaii because I can't pay that rent every month. And I'm like, you know what? There's a Turkish phrase. They said, "Angang kinrosi." You work for someone, you're not working for yourself. So and then I have my nieces and nephews that they born US, in Guam, and they're growing up, and listening to them, they're like, this is not a happy life. I'm like, what do you mean it's not a happy life? You born here, this is your, it's like, this is your home because you're born here. No, because we're gonna have credit, we're gonna have debit, all these things. So we will never live a free life. I said, okay, so you want to live a free life? Go back to Chuk, because you don't really worry about anything. You don't need to pay for water. You don't need to pay for a house. So there is also this side of this new generation that is also coming up, and I listened to them and I said, oh wow, it's different. But I'm just sharing this because I'm happy that Nadine shared her experience and how the family structure going on. But it is true, we are moving out here because we're looking for opportunities, and we are grateful to the US. It's just that there are things that it's not good for us.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna just add that part of the issue with like being able to return home is some of the impacts of the US's presence or wanting to colonize or wanting to Americanize like a place like Chuk. It makes it hard for me or my family to have stayed or to return. So it's almost like an irony in thinking that I'm going to return home, there's going to be free. I don't think it'd be the same thing as it was many years ago. So like I just wanted to point out the irony in that, and I would feel like that's the way it is here even in Guam, or like for the people in Guam. I need to clarify that because it can be kind of I don't want to be give off the wrong thing that being in the islands that there's no issue. There, I feel like there is now because of this presence or relationship with outside forces, whatever that may be. But you know which one I'm talking about. I think I want to make sure that I add this because I'm gonna notice. The only thing that I wanted to add for this film or this conversation was the environmental impact of all of the Christmas drop. And I really appreciate Kara's thoughts and insights about what are better ways to that, if the other partner or US was listening, or the US military is listening. I really appreciate all that. I was the only thing that I thought of was as a challenge to, if this drop is going to continue, was that for every box that they drop, that they come back with 2 empty ones to pick up the trash, because of what the others have mentioned, like there's nowhere to put these trash. So it's like they want to have this humanitarian effort, but then they need to come back and do the environmental effort of cleaning up because of the trash that we really didn't ask for, but is part of this thing. Thank you.
Something that I'd been wanting to say is that this film, and then also listening to the other podcasts about Operation Christmas Drop that you had on Fanatsu, really just really made me think more about militarization in Micronesia, and how oftentimes in the other parts of Micronesia outside of the Marshall Islands or the Marianas, we tend not to think of the US as a military presence, because there isn't such a military presence, like especially in Pohnpei. We don't have a base, and basically we do look at the military as our white saviors, because usually they come as CBs and build things and build roads or build structures, and so we do very much still associate the US with being this white savior. And I've just been thinking more about how we have this arrangement with the US, and we get to go to the US, travel to the US freely, but really at what price? What are we giving up to have this freedom? And, but basically if the US decided they wanted to come and build a big military base in Pohnpei, they could. And those are the kind of things that like everyday Pohnpeians don't talk about or even think about. It's just kind of, oh, well, Guam has a military base and there's Kwajalein. So, no one's gonna, the US won't build a military base here. But I don't know, I've just been thinking a lot more about that. And I think there needs to be more discussions across the region about militarization and what that means and what we're giving up to have this relationship with the US. And especially because I've been living in Europe for the last few years away from the US, and I studied in New Zealand, which is also outside of the US. So I've spent a lot of time outside of that US colonial frame. So it's just made me think more critically about these bigger issues and the Micronesia's Americanization and just how problematic it is and how it's just never going to serve our people in the way that it should. So yeah, it's just, I guess this film, which is obviously just American propaganda, and it's just very pro-America. And in fact, the whole time I watched it, I was just laughing hysterically because I couldn't believe how bad the dialogue was and the kind of statements they were making. I was just like, seriously, they're just saying that, but these are the kind of things that our fellow Micronesians and Chamorros included are going to watch, and it's just going to perpetuate this notion of America as always saving us. And we really need to start talking about these things more in our communities because there are repercussions. It isn't just a film, So yeah, I guess that's just what I've been thinking about more lately, especially in this COVID time. Because being an American is not a good thing right now, being associated with America, not that it has ever been, but it's just really bad. And in the eyes of the bigger world, it's just like a disaster, and just the way that other places are handling the pandemic is just really shows how many problems there are in the US. And Micronesians are the ones really suffering a lot in the US right now because of this pandemic, because of the kind of jobs that we do in the US. So yeah, I guess I've just been thinking about these larger issues in relation to the film. And
No,
yeah.
thank you. No, thank you for bringing that in, because I think I remember once hearing a story about sort of when in the early days of the Trust Territory, when the U.S. was trying, when there was negotiations and the U.S. State Department was, trying, they were taking different leaders from the islands or young and up and coming leaders around the world and around the U.S., showing them sort of different types of government, but always trying to talk up the United States. That sort of, you want to be close to us, you want to be like us. And I remember hearing about the experiences of some who were told about the greatness of the United States, but as they traveled across the United States, they weren't allowed to stay in hotels because they were for whites only, and they were not allowed. They were kicked off buses because of their skin color, and so those types of experiences gave some of those young men who later became leaders a realization that America can be helpful to us, but we always need to be able to protect ourselves, because America is not what is advertised. And so I think even in what many of you have spoken about in terms of being able to cut yourself off from the world to protect from the coronavirus, and even to stop the United States, Nadine, as you said, to pause their great humanitarian gesture. I think it's part of that realization that yes, there's positives, there's benefits to this relationship. But if you kind of go the route that Chamorros in Guam and the Marianas, for example, have, where you almost become engulfed in the United States, then you lose. You can lose too much. You can lose so much because, thinking about that's why I've appreciated this conversation. And Kara had to leave, but she also wanted to say that she really appreciated the opportunity to be a part of this. And I wanted to give everyone, now I had an Operation Christmas drop going behind me, and that was the timer for the episode. So now Netflix is showing me previews for other Christmas themed movies. So I wanted to give each of you though a chance to kind of summarize or just give some final thoughts, sort of from any perspective that you want. We touched on so many good conversations, and Emily, to what you said there, I liked how you said that something like militarization has to be a Micronesian conversation, not just a conversation that Chamorros have, or a conversation that other islanders have about Chamorros and about Guam or about the Marshall Islands. Because even talking about the military enlistment rates that so many of the islands have, the veterans issues that so many of the islands have, can't get their benefits when they're in the islands. All of these things, heavy impacts. And so I think this was yes, I learned a lot too in this conversation. So I thank you all. But I wanted to give each of you a chance. And so Kathy, did you want to sort of share some closing thoughts first?
Again, I just want to say that I would appreciate if they include in their conversation in the film about, they're going to drop these boxes on the islands, but they can also help out with health insurance, with our population or our community that they're losing health insurance in Hawaii. That would be a big help. To put them back on the health insurance, because that's why a lot of our people are affected by this COVID, because a lot of them don't have health insurance and they don't want to go to the hospital because, they know they don't have health insurance. So they're just going to end up at home and then go to emergency room. It's too late, So maybe that would be part of the conversation in the film, we're gonna drop this, but maybe we can also do something about this health insurance for these people in the US. So that's my summary.
That's a very good point. It's a very good point because it's something where, as you and others mentioned earlier, Micronesians are not just empty figures to make America look good, but you bring in their culture, you bring in their issues, you bring in them as sort of real people, not just figures in the background. Thank you. And so, Nadine, I see you. You're looking off to the side, trying not to go. So who would like to go next? Lenny, Nadine, Emily?
I'll go.
Okay.
So my biggest problem, I guess, in short, of what the film represented, or what about the film basically, is racism against Micronesians in Guam and Hawaii is a result, systemically and through the community, is a result of the ideology that Micronesians are leeches. And this film plays into that by perpetuating that you need to rescue the Micronesians so that they can stop being leeches. When in fact, we are not leeches, we're taxpayers, contributors to the economy who do not qualify for any of those benefits that we pay taxes to. I just wanted to make sure that's put out there and corrected, because a lot of people are going to see this as, well, I'm going to be a hero this Christmas and give more to the Micronesians.
Oh, good point. That's a good point. I always remember the example when, like, a corporation, here's a story about one of their employees who's struggling. Oh, there was a story, like it was like KFC or McDonald's or something, where one of their employees was walking to work because they couldn't afford a car. And so the corporation bought him a used car. And it's like, why doesn't the corporation pay him enough so he can buy a car? Like, and it's one of those things. So thank you for bringing that in and bringing in those reminders that if you want to help, if you want to support, then don't do it in these dehumanizing ways, looking down on people. Because if you accept the representation in this movie, then it explains why it's easy to accept the dehumanization, sort of the rhetoric that you see in places like Hawaii about sort of Micronesians. So Nadine or Emily? Emily's looking down. Okay, Nadine.
What to say to summarize? I think the only thing I can add, well, there's a lot, but what I'm going to try to end with is, while we can't, well, given that Kara mentioned or had insights that that people did try to go back in there to change or to correct, right? There was that effort, and that it wasn't paid attention to. So obviously, that just again shows, reflects that dynamic between, I guess, islanders or people from the islands with the bigger people, I guess. Or I do hope, though, that this film, that the people really watch it, in that they will, the ones that are that were not satisfied with it, or have issues with it, that this film is like the catalyst to kind of get into filmmaking, like Lenny and Kara, to really get into writing, like Emily with poetry and just another writing, or become PhD holders like you, Emily, and Miguel, so that they would be the authors of their lives, or the directors of their lives on platforms like like movies and books. So and there's been many others before this film, right? But I think times have changed too, and there's like all these opportunities to learn or to find resources to enhance that learning, getting to know a skill or lessons to become those things. I think that's the only thing I can really say for now. Just be inspired to write their own story and and get the community support, what the film should have done, get the community input. Just how we do it in the islands. We don't do it by ourselves. It's a community effort. And so it may be hard and challenging, but then to be really profound and meaningful, that would be the approach. And that really speaks to how our culture has thrived for all these years. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's a very important reminder. And I like what Lenny mentioned earlier, that there's already people like Kara, like himself, who are trying, who are putting themselves out there, putting their work out there. And what we just need to do is we need to not do sort of that unfortunate, I know it's a very Chamorro thing, I don't know if other islands do it, where you pay like $300 for a Taylor Swift ticket, but you won't pay $20 to go listen to your cousin play. Yeah, I didn't want to assume. I had an idea that maybe it's Pan-Micronesian, but I didn't want to assume. Didn't want to assume.
I just complained as a carver. I also carve, and I just complained about that recently. But I also want to point out that Miguel, even this. Sorry, I'm cutting Emily's opportunity to talk, but even this podcast, all the podcasts before this, all the episodes prior to this that you've been putting together is part of that media that's filmmakers are. Miguel is actually also an amazing screenwriter and filmmaker. He and I have worked on a couple of films together. He's actually, I tend to forget because he wears so many hats and he wears them really well. But yeah, so this show, this podcast, and all the series of Fanatsu are part of those that, challenges the Western forces of trying to tell us who we are when we ourselves can tell who we are. Yeah. So I thank you, Fanatsu, for that opportunity as well.
Oh no, I appreciate you and Nate for putting this together. It's been awesome. And so, Emily, you have the final, you can be the Martin Luther King Jr. moment. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm also really grateful to Fanatsu, and I really got a lot from listening to your previous podcast about the film, and I really plan to continue to tune in to the podcast. And I don't really listen to many, and I've never been on one, so thank you for this opportunity. And also, kind of reiterating what Nadine said, I think films like this just reiterate and how essential it is that we have our own narratives and our own representation, which people like you, Miguel, Lenny, and Kara, are working so hard towards. And I feel like in this day and age with social media, it's all about the visual, and people, I feel like Micronesians are just dying to see ourselves represented in any way. And in some ways, it makes me kind of sad that we're just so desperate to be seen in whichever form or shape that takes, which is oftentimes a bit disturbing, especially on social media. Because what I see being oftentimes portrayed by my fellow Micronesians, Pohnpeians, is not how I see myself or I see Pohnpeians I know or grow up with. So I just feel like it's so important that we have our own storytellers representing ourselves how we want to be represented. And I hope that in the future that we're not just so desperate to be seen in Hollywood, no matter what kind of representation they give us, and that isn't kind of the only way that we see ourselves as being seen by the outer world, greater world, because the greater world isn't just America and Hollywood. And, there's a bigger world out there that doesn't just look towards America for everything, which unfortunately, I feel like Micronesia, we've been so colonized we always just look towards America. But I'm just grateful that we had this conversation, and I hope that we can continue to have dialogues like this because it's so important.
Oh, definitely. I think that to Emily and to all of you, I think that even you've already planted the seeds in my mind that we need to have a militarization across Micronesia episode. So
Yeah.
maybe January or February 1, in which we can talk about it from the Marianas perspective, but also a Marshallese perspective, and even somebody from Palau who's going to talk about sort of the base that they're proposing there, but also somebody because Chucky is joining the military in increasing numbers as well. So even a discussion which can just connect us all to how we're all being affected by the same sort of war machine, the same apparatus, but on different edges of it, right? And so I think you've planted that in my mind. So I appreciate that, because I think that would be a great episode to continue the sort of a cross-island dialogue, right? To make sure that when we're talking about Micronesia, we're not just sort of using the geographic regional thing on its own in an empty way, but we're really talking about we're sharing each other's stories. We're seeing how we're the same. We're seeing how we're different. We're seeing how we can work together. And so to all of you, I appreciate once again, Sidus Masinu Todo Samsu, thank you so much again for participating. We lost a few boxes on the way. Now we're down to a 5-pack. But it still looks really nice, especially for a pandemic, to have a 5-pack like this on your stomach. It's nice. I don't have my kids tease me that I have a 1-pack now. I used to have a 6-pack, and now I have a big 1-pack. But anyways, thank you to everyone watching. Sidus Masinu Todos Hamzuni Omega. Remember, you can support Fanatsu by signing up as a patron on Patreon. But this might be the last episode for 2020, and so thank you all for joining. Adios, hasta ki manalihi talo.
Adios.